Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call meeting number 8 of the General Government Licensing Committee to order. Welcome to committee members, to any members of council in attendance today, to the public and the media. You can follow the agenda and debate on your computer, tablet, or smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. The General Government Licensing Committee acknowledges the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty Number 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I'd also like to point out that we have a new seating arrangement in the room that was put in place. There's now 2 AODA compliant seating areas in the back. That was just put in place today, so I just wanted to make sure everyone in the general public is aware of that. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none. A motion to confirm the minutes of September 4th, 2019. Councillor Matlow, all in favor? Carried. There's a green sheet in front of you. There are 2 speakers on item number 19. First item is 8.1 Fleet Services Division Overview. I'm going to hold that for a presentation by staff. Item number 2 is the Metropolitan Toronto Pension Plan proposed merger with the Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement System, or OMERS plan. Implementation of OMERS indexing. Motion. Councillor Matlow is moving the recommendations. All in favor? Carried. Number 3 is the Corporation of the City of York Employee Pension Plan Termination and Windup. Councillor Nunziata is moving the recommendations. Sorry? Councillor Nunziata is moving the recommendations. All in favor? Carried. Number 4, expropriation of the Orphaned lane at the rear of 8 Cumberland Street for municipal purposes, including a new public lane. Councillor Holiday is moving number 4. All in favor? Carried. Number 5 is the expropriation of 300 Commissioner Street for the future Broadview Avenue Extension Project. Councillor Holiday is moving the recommendations. Number 5, all in favor? Carried. Number 6, property acquisition costs and funding requirements for the Toronto Transit Commission, second exit and fire ventilation upgrade and easier access phase 3 projects. Councillor Fillion is moving the recommendation. Number 6, all in favor? Carried. Number 7, transfer of 2530 Gerrard Street East to Build Toronto Incorporated. Councillor Matlow is moving the recommendations in number 7. All in favor? Carried. Number 8, update on fire and life safety at the City of Toronto and non-competitive agreement with Building Reports Canada for the provision of fire and life safety tracking and compliance software. And we do have a presentation by staff if the committee would like that. Number 9, amendment to purchase order number 6045166 issued to the DPSL Group Limited for construction services for the Albert Campbell Square expansion project at the Scarborough Civic Centre. Councillor Matlow, moving the recommendations. I do too. It's long overdue. All in favor? Carried. Number 10, amendment to purchase order number 6045978 issued to the Phoenix Restoration Incorporated for the Casa Loma Phase 9 structural repairs, or the better known as the perimeter wall restoration. Councillor Matlow, all in favor? Carried. Number 11, additional amendments to 3 purchase orders for the construction of the Canoe Landing project, previously identified as Block 31, Community Center / Childcare Center, and 2 elementary schools. Councillor Matlow is moving the recommendations. All in favor? Carried. Number 12, a non-competitive contract with Siemens Canada Limited for building automation systems upgrade at Metro Hall at 55 John Street. Councillor Holiday is moving the recommendations. All in favor? Carried. Number 13 is a non-competitive contract with Joe Johnson Equipment for proprietary original equipment manufacturer parts and services. Councillor Holliday is moving the recommendations on number 13. All in favor? Carried. Don't rock the boat, Councillor Matlow. Number 14, non-competitive contract with Strongco Limited Partnership for proprietary original equipment manufacturer parts and services. Councillor Matlow is moving the recommendations. All in favor? Carried. Number 15, non-competitive contract with Toromont Industries Limited for proprietary original equipment manufacturer parts and services. Councillor Holliday and Councillor Matlow are moving this one jointly. All in favor? Carried. Number 16, the City of Toronto 2019 to 2023 Green Fleet Plan, the Pathway to Sustainable City of Toronto Fleet Plan, and the 2014 to 2018 Green Fleet Plan results and wrap-up. Councillor Nunziata is moving the recommendations. All in favor? Carried. Number 17, standing authority for solicitor to execute tolling agreements. No, not the Gardner Expressway. Anybody? Councillor Matlow, moving the recommendation. All in favor? Carried. No. We can move an amendment if you want. Number 18, Toronto Licensing Tribunal 2018 Annual Report. Councillor Holliday is holding number 18, and the Executive Director is here if you'd like to question her. Okay. Number 19, we have two deputants, City of Toronto Municipal Code Chapter 545 Licensing Bylaw Updates. Sorry. Number 20, proposed business license for vapor product retailers. Anybody for number 20? Councillor Matlow, moving the recommendations. All in favor? Carried. And then on the pink sheets in front of you, there's two items in new business. The first one is City Hall Council Chambers Modernization Update. I need a motion to introduce it. All in favor? Carried. And then the second one is referred to as City of Toronto's Open Data Portal, Historical and Current Data. I need a motion to introduce that as well. All in favor? Carried. And I'll leave those two. We'll come back to them if you want to be. Sorry? You have a motion for number 18? Okay. Staff are okay with it? Okay. Is there a motion for number?
There is for number 18. We just need to prepare it. So
Okay.
perhaps we
Sorry, Councillor Holliday, they're still transferring your handwriting to... Okay, so we will go back to item number 1, and we have a presentation by Fleet Services. Morning, gentlemen.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Lloyd Brierley. I'm the General Manager of the Fleet Services Division, and I'm here today to provide a presentation on the division as well as an overview. With me today are Grant Janes, Director of Fleet Maintenance, and Angelo Cleric, Program Manager, Strategic Projects. So, for those who aren't familiar with the term fleet, Fleet Services Division is the vehicle, equipment, and fuel provider for the city. It is the largest municipal fleet in Canada, and by the nature of municipal operations, municipal fleets are typically one of the most complex fleets that there is. Fleet Services is recognized in North America as a center of excellence in municipal fleet management. As you can see by the slide in front of you, there are two expected program streams, being fleet management and fuel management, and I'll touch on those more throughout the presentation. Underpinning those program streams are the core values of the division with respect to good governance, environmental sustainability, fiscal sustainability, and by nature of the work that we do, which tends to involve a lot of mechanical repair on heavy-duty vehicles and so forth, safe work practices, professionalism are core to our business, as is the focus on people, training, development, and creating an engaged workforce. In North America and in globally, one of the foundations for the division being skilled trades is there's been a continual challenge with the growth and attraction of skilled trades across North America and the world. Moving on to the organizational structure. The high-level organizational structure that you see before you, managing the areas of the division, is 3 directors and 2 program managers covering off asset management, which is maintenance, or procurement, disposal, engineering, fleet maintenance, fairly self-explanatory, and business management around safety, finance, and like strategic projects is things such as the citywide green fleet plan that I'll touch on more later. Moving into the citywide fleet composition, just over 5,700 assets in the fleet, with a breakdown between light, medium, heavy, and off-road. It's important to note that while heavy may seem lower in number, typically a heavy vehicle in comparison to a light-duty passenger sedan can take 8 times as much maintenance and repair effort. So while they may be smaller in number, the maintenance and repair effort is typically substantially larger. Going through to the services provided, again, fairly logical. Managing the vehicle engineering, procurement, and acquisition, about 500 vehicles a year that are maintained through the division while ensuring legislative requirements, around 26,000 work orders a year. Some of the maintenance is done internally as well as externally. And through that, providing that around the contracts, goods, services, commodities, relates to 22,000 invoices and 21,000 interface transactions a year. And the last item related directly to the fleet managed by Fleet Services is the training, testing, compliance, oversight, management for 11,000 city staff. And the next piece around fuel management, we provide fuel to vehicles that are within the division as well as those that are managed beyond the division as well. So that speaks to the 7,100 number, which is a little different than the 5,700 that resides within the division itself. So getting into the more important parts, outcome-based performance measures, starting at the bottom right of the slide, the commercial vehicle operators rating, which is a legislative requirement that is calculated by the province of Ontario. We're doing fairly well there. This is all the vehicles that are 4,500 kilograms and greater. And the target is 34%, currently at 33% with this. Unlike most percentages, a lower number is better. So the lower the number, the better we're doing. Operating cost, again, fairly close to target, 29 cents per kilometer, not including fuel, target of 28 cents. So a little bit of opportunity for improvement. Where we get into the areas where there are some challenges is around fleet availability and SOGR backlog. Fleet availability is with respect to vehicles that are off the road for maintenance and repair purposes. A little below the target there, and that speaks to managing capacity of vehicles requiring maintenance and repair work, balancing workforce and requirements with staff and vehicle numbers, which correlates directly with SOGR backlog, where we are still a ways away from where we need to be, which is 10% of the fleet being over expected life as kind of the maximum threshold. So some opportunity for improvement there, which I'll touch on in the next slide. With respect to state of good repair backlog, in 2019 alone, we're investing about $60 million in state of good repair backlog to replace vehicles and equipment in the city's fleet, or over the next 10 years, $734 million is the plan to replace vehicles and equipment. There has been some considerable work done with respect to SOGR, where from 2016 to date, the backlog is reduced from $103.5 million to the current $47 million, which equates to a 55% reduction. Again, while that's good, there's still an opportunity to do more. Vehicles that are beyond optimum life tend to cost, in some cases, a heavy vehicle can cost double for maintenance and repair what a vehicle that is within optimum life or planned replacement can be. And that correlates with the downtime associated. Obviously, a lot more breakdowns, maintenance and repair, downtime, and impacts to citizen-facing service levels. Into the strategic objectives. Three real key strategic objectives for the divisions. Division 3, operational optimization, organizational transformation, and systems building, which, to say it in a different way, is doing things better, doing new things, and working with others, or doing new things with others. So doing things better, that's really improving our internal and external maintenance capacity and service delivery to reduce downtime, aligning efforts around lowest total cost of ownership by increasing collaborative effort around life cycle planning with our clients and working with manufacturers, organizational transformation, standardizing the fleet. Obviously, there's an opportunity there. I mentioned about one of the most complex fleets. The City of Toronto fleet currently has about 1,000 makes and models. If you compare that to a dealer that would have 12 to 14 different makes and models, it gives an idea of the magnitude. Hence the importance for standardization. And lastly, a systems building approach or working with others, which is leading innovative solutions for asset management and procurement. And that ties into innovation, Green Fleet Plan, one of the items on the agenda today, and piloting new technologies, which I'll expand in the following slides. Green Fleet, this year's Green Fleet, this report for the next 5 years, the Green Fleet Plan, now encompasses 98% of all city fleet. I won't bother to read the slides to you, but all of the city divisions and most of the agencies within the City of Toronto. And the previous plan has been a success, and we're building on those successes for the new plan. So touching on those successes, from the 1990 levels, we have been successful in a 30% GHG reduction by 2020. Actually, as of 2018, exceeded the target by 4.3%. And working towards the remaining targets of 45% city-owned fleet to low carbon by 65% GHG reduction. And the last target, which I believe is just in the process of changing a little bit, continuing to work towards that. One of the important things in industry is that in the medium, heavy, and off-road classes, there isn't a lot of available options for EVs and other things like that. So as those options become available and viable, we continue to exercise and move forward. Talking about an innovative and viable option, Mr. Chair, you'd be familiar with this, where we started with car share a number of years ago, working with external companies to provide car share from those companies. Now, the next evolution of that is fleet share, which is using city fleet vehicles through similar type of technology that's used with the car share, where you can, in essence, book the vehicle online, similar to a calendar appointment for a meeting. You can see if there's a vehicle available, book it for that period of time, use your access card and a PIN number to go up to the vehicle, access the keys, and use the vehicle for that period of time. It moves us away from individual ownership to more of a collective ownership and addresses things such as underutilized fleet and the opportunity to minimize our expenses on capital. Another important aspect is our support around the Vision Zero initiative, obviously a very important initiative, where we've had a number of successes in industry-leading vehicle designs, including one of the more recent initiatives around 360-degree cameras on large trucks, which provides a wide field of view around the entire vehicle where there could be considerable blind spots. Ultrasonic backup sensors that detect if someone is walking behind the vehicle, and then options that have been around for a while, telematics, GPS, that allow us to track and manage the vehicle, which ties into the next one around commercial fleet safety that I touched on earlier, where we're looking at moving away from the current method of paper-based pre-trip inspections, again, a legislative requirement, to electronic. Beyond that, one of the reasons, so for fleet safety, commercial vehicle operator registration, we're typically, out of the larger municipalities in Ontario, in either first or second place, depending on the month, designing behavioral-based training to address issues before they become more serious issues, as well as conducting a number of spot checks. And bringing us to the last slide, really driving and supporting the core values. We have had some successes. In 2018 alone, received 3 awards within the division, 1 North American Award for Business Innovation, an EPIC Canadian Procurement Award with our partners from PMMD, and lastly, a City Manager Award for an automated system for fleet and fuel management that got away from the card-based or other-based technologies to RFID automated technology. This is one of the ones that across North America was more widely recognized, and we've had a lot of questions about it. And lastly, when I touched on the integrity aspect and aligning with our focus on our people and our safety, that 2017 award really speaks to that. Dr. Sheila Basswer Award for a significant reduction in lost time injuries and health and safety program improvements. So, went through it quite quickly. That was the intention. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you, Lloyd. Questions? Councillor Filion and Councillor Holliday.
On the slide under key performance measures, do you keep a stat for what percentage of the time our vehicles are actually in use?
Yes, through the chair, that fleet availability, top right corner, that is exactly what that is.
Well, I thought that was when the vehicles
They're- well,
were available to
Yeah, sorry, correction,
Should we
yes.
keep a
They're
stat on-
available for use as far
we
as,
keep a stat on whether they're actually being used.
so we do have a low utilization report, and it's important to note that there was the audit earlier this year that spoke to this, where there were a number of low utilized or underutilized vehicles identified. So we're continuing to work on improving that, reporting on that. That ties into telematics. There are vehicles that can be justified low utilization, plumbers, carpenters, vans, vehicles that take crews to parks. That's justified low utilization. So
back to, are you tracking it? Because it's not one of the key performance measures on the chart.
Yep, we do track it, and we do send out reports once a year currently, and looking to improve upon that.
And who do you send the reports to?
The reports go out to all of our clients, divisions, and agencies that have where we manage their fleet. We have a number of other divisions or agencies where we don't manage the fleet as well, so we don't report on those.
So if this committee wanted those stats, you could send them to us?
Absolutely. Yep.
The other question I have is on the fleet availability. It's the exact same round number for 4 years in a row, so that can't be a real number, I'm assuming. You couldn't be highly statistically unlikely to have a round exact number 4 years at the same one 4 years in a row.
Yeah, again, so one of the things that has tied in here is some of the methodology behind that has changed a little bit. So a very valid point. I have no way to go back retroactively and calculate. It may have been a little bit worse actually at one time, but I can't.
So how did, is the 85% a real number, or is it a guesstimate?
No, it's a real number.
And it just happened to be exactly 85%?
Yeah, or 84 point something that was rounded to 85. Yeah.
Okay, and then it's a guesstimate for the previous years?
As it gets further back, it's applying that same methodology over those years. So to explain, one of the methodologies is that if a vehicle, some vehicles are needed 8 hours or 12 hours a day, some vehicles are needed 24 hours a day, and that may change over time, and we don't always have that criteria. So if the vehicle's needed 12 hours a day and it's off the road for that period, that's downtime. If it's needed 24 hours a day, we calculate that. Does that make sense?
Not exactly, but I won't belabor it right now. I could always go offline with it. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Holiday.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So, Lloyd, you mentioned something called total cost of ownership in the middle of the presentation, but I wondered if you could talk to me a little bit about how total cost of ownership compares to those four lenses over there. The way I've got it in my mind is total cost of ownership is a consideration, how much you bought the vehicle for, how much all the servicing costs on the vehicle, and there's kind of a sweet spot where you would also make a decision to dispose of the vehicle. And that sweet spot could be a year after owning it, it could be 20 years after owning it. It all depends on the math of how much it costs to operate that vehicle over the lifespan in relation to what you bought it for. And that seemed to me to be a different figure than those. And so could you just talk to me a little bit about how that factors into how you make decisions on the fleet?
Absolutely. So you're exactly right. Total cost of ownership, and that sweet spot is when the operating cost starts to outweigh capital costs. So you have declining capital costs from the vehicle when it's new till it's old, and operating costs start to increase over life. So where those two lines intersect, that is your sweet spot. And so what we look at is we'll have individual vehicles, or starting with classes of vehicles and then drilling down with individual vehicles, where we look at the class level, the procurement cost, the maintenance and repair cost, the fuel cost, and start to assess what that is over the life of the vehicle. It gets a little complex because as vehicles change, a new model comes out, they may change something. It is always a moving target with 1,000 different makes and models. It's tough to do, but on the more expensive ones where we really do work through that. What you're seeing there on the cost per kilometer, we are drawing on measures that we have in FPARs as we work towards total cost of ownership. We don't have that in all classes. For everything, we're implementing a capital asset management module that really helps us to do that economic replacement theory approach.
So in a perfect world, you will dispose of that vehicle right at that magic point, in a perfect world. And then there's noise in that system because of a lot of the things you just talked about. Have you got any measure of how close you are between the magic optimal spot and the point at which you dispose the vehicle and buy another one? Do you have any sense? And to me, that's a measurement of efficiency, right? Because you're optimizing all the costs if you're able to exchange those vehicles at the right point. Do any of those factors speak to it? Is there a magic number that you sort of keep in the office, or is there a system at which you are constantly looking at that?
Yes, so percentage of fleet over expected life. So that sweet spot, if that was 0, that would mean that everything was replaced when that intersection point occurs. Okay. Realizing that you're never, you can strive for perfection. You're never really going to hit perfection, hence the 10% target. We'd love it to be less than that, but that's really it. And the important aspects around procurement, and it's something that it's become more prevalent now, and we hear it more, which is getting away from the low bid approach and really how you specify your assets when you're purchasing it. You may find that you spend more up front in the purchase, sure, and over the life cycle end up with a lower total cost. So you may buy the highest bid up front, but over the life cycle of that asset, actually produced the lowest total cost of ownership.
So, but that's what I don't understand. So you talked about state of good repair. Now, that, to me, is a separate concept, because you want all the vehicles in a state of good repair, but, maybe the cheapskate in me says, so what if it, you don't paint it or fix the cracked windshield? I mean, when you sell the vehicle, you're going to lose on that. So to me, it goes back to, what is that magic point? And so this report says that 33% of the fleet are away from that. So if you were just to get to a bundle of money, would you be able then to optimize the fleet? Because at the end of the day, it's about savings. So we're almost losing money because we're not hitting that point. And what is it what would it take for you to get to the 0 point?
You're exactly right. That's exactly it. So the 47 million is, and that's why we've been working to drive that number down since it was actually higher prior to 2016. To drive that number down towards 0 is that percentage of fleet that is beyond state of good repair, how it's used. In one aspect, it's replacing the entire fleet as they come due for replacement. But the backlog is really, as I mentioned, those that have passed that optimum point. So the 47 million is the one-time requirement to get that to 0, but then there are ongoing capital contribution requirements within the division, within the respective divisions that also overlay on top of that on an annual basis.
I'm going to slip in one more quick one, and it's just a different concept, is how do you track the difference between the demand and the utilization of the fleet? And we talked a little, I think we mentioned the Auditor General's report that there were some vehicles there that just weren't used enough. And it seems to me that, you're in a client service model and program areas are supposed to be using the fleet. How do you detect when there's a mismatch? They say, well, we need a truck, and then they end up not using it. How's that reconciled over time?
Yep, great points. You're touching on some of our challenges for sure. Is where we, at this stage, because of our authority within the city, we identify vehicles that appear to be underutilized, which is 5,000 kilometers a year or less. Yep. And send out the reports to those divisions and ask them to respond back to us, identifying what the case is for that vehicle. If it's, I mentioned plumbers, vans, or carpenters, where they provide us the information to support if they need that vehicle or not.
Are they paying a little extra? Because now it's a premium to have a vehicle sitting around.
That's it. And so defining as far as what is a real operational need versus what is a nice to have, which then ties into the fleet share, where we have a little more advanced methodology that we can employ to do that. So telematics, for instance, GPS, we'll be able to tell through automated reports, has that vehicle moved this week? Has it moved this month? And is there an opportunity to do something different? So that's exactly what that's driving at.
Thank you, Councillor Holiday. Councillor Nunziata.
A few years ago, we talked about shared services with fleet. So what happened on that? Did we ever go and complete that?
Yeah.
We're talking about the various divisions.
Yes, so through the chair, actually, and they're all behind me here somewhere. We have a fleet management steering committee, which is all of the city fleet divisions and agencies, those that you would see listed in the Green Fleet Plan.
Right.
So it includes everyone from all the city divisions that are managed by fleet services, and then those that aren't managed by fleet services, such as fire, paramedics, as well as TTC and so forth.
So have we looked at managing those vehicles as part of shared services? Because we had an audit a few years ago looking at that, and that we share services with all the divisions, where there would be a huge savings.
Yeah, so to date, that has never moved forward beyond the Fleet Management Steering Committee
How come?
approach.
How come?
Anything beyond that would require the will of council to move forward.
I thought we did. I thought we did. No, we didn't do that?
Nope.
Well, I find that strange. I don't remember we didn't do that. I thought we did it through the audit report a few years ago. Because we never received an update on that, and Okay, that's
Yep.
strange.
It has been touched on in the
So
audit.
you're saying you need direction again from council, even though we did recommend it a few years ago?
If council wanted to explore moving forward with something more formal on that, that would require direction, yes.
And so what happened to the direction that we moved a few years ago?
I'm not, the only direction I'm familiar with was the forming of the Fleet Management Steering Committee, which is a body of all of the fleets that meet regularly to review initiatives where we could collaborate, such as the citywide fuel procurement.
Okay, I thought we approved it. I mean, you know, this goes back a few years ago, which is kind of strange. I don't understand that. But anyway, my next question, you mentioned that when cars are off the road for maintenance. So how long are these cars off the road for maintenance? Well, what is the time that they're off the road? We do in-house maintenance, correct?
Through the chair, we actually do in-house and external maintenance. So all of class 1 and 2, so passenger vehicle maintenance, is contracted out unless there's specialized requirements on the vehicle.
So what would be the time that a vehicle would be off the road for maintenance? Days, weeks, or?
Yeah, and so I'll use the passenger vehicles as
Okay.
that is the most relatable example. And yeah, do you remember it's probably 2 weeks a year that those are off the road for maintenance and repair right now.
2 weeks?
Yep. Yeah, again, that's rough number off the top of my head. I have the specifics. We measure and report on it, and actually the audit that was just out in phase 1 identified that as well. And there absolutely is an opportunity for improvement there for sure.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Matlow, do you have anything? Speakers, Councillor Fillion, I think you had a motion.
Thank you that the General Government and Licensing Committee requests the General Manager Fleet Services to report annually to the General Government and Licensing Committee on the City of Toronto's fleet availability and utilization percentage rate. So we know from the Auditor General's report that those have been issues. In the report that we have, we don't have anything on utilization, and the percentages on availability are, I thought they were a bit odd. So anyway, I think just doing our due diligence, we should be having a look at this at least for the next few years.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions of the mover? Seeing none. Any other speakers on this item? So we have an amendment before us for Councillor Fillion's motion. All in favor of the motion? Carried. Item is amended. All in favor? Carried. And before we get to our next item, I just wanted to introduce two gentlemen. One of them I think you're familiar with. So our new Chief Information and Security Officer, Mr. Kush Sharma. Kush, welcome to City Hall. Mr. Sharma was just hired as our new CISO after a very extensive process, and I want to welcome you to City Hall. Mr. Sharma has 18 years of experience in cybersecurity and risk and awareness management, and thank you for accepting the position. And beside him is our new Chief Technology Officer, Mr. Lawrence Ida. I'm sure he was our previous position, was our Deputy CIO, and after a very extensive process, the committee senior management team hired Mr. Ida, and want to welcome you in your new position as well. Thank you, gentlemen. And we're on number 8. Sorry?
Mr. Chair, on a point of order, I wondered if there's appetite to vary the procedure. I'd like to be able to send the tribunal chair and the manager from court services on their way if we can pass hopefully a non-controversial motion on number 18.
Number 18?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think anyone has any questions on the report, so
Does anybody have any questions on this report?
if we can get the motion on the screen, I can. So I'm just going to request a report back. In the report are some recommendations from the chair, and I understand procedurally that the report is written to receive it, but this is just a way to have the staff examine the recommendations from the current chair and report back if there's any changes needed coming out of that. Hope you'll support that.
Okay. Any questions of the mover? Seeing none. All in favor? Carried. Item is amended. All in favor? Carried. We're on item number 8, update on fire and life safety at the City of Toronto and non-competitive agreement with Building Reports Canada for the provision of fire and life safety tracking and compliance software. And there's a presentation on this item. Morning, Pat. Whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. My colleague, Ryan Duggan, Director of Fire Life Safety Program Office, and I will provide you with an update on fire life safety initiatives we have undertaken over the past year. We will provide you with an update on fire life safety inspection requirements and the type of inspections that are conducted in city facilities, as well as an overview on the fire life safety industry. We will provide you with an update on the staff-initiated 10% audit as directed by City Council and our go-forward strategy to get the city to compliance. In August 2018, we established the Fire Life Safety Task Force, which we formalized into the Fire Life Safety Program Office in May 2019. Over the past year, the Fire Life Safety Program Office has created 48 standard operating procedures based on industry best practices that we have shared citywide. We've created a training manual and associated training. We created a fire life safety website which hosts all of our fire life safety documentation and is a central reference point for use by all divisions, agencies, and corporations. We've also set up an interim repository to upload all of the fire life safety inspection reports. Since its launch in July 2019, we currently have 12 divisions using it, and we've uploaded over 7,500 documents. We've established a complaint process for staff to report concerns with fire life safety vendors. We're currently completing a building inventory of all fire life safety systems for city buildings, which we will complete by year end. We're currently developing a master fire plan that defines accountabilities and responsibilities citywide, which the program office will launch in the next 2 months. We've also engaged with industry associations. We've received support from Toronto Fire Services, as well as the Toronto Transit Commission, who have an established fire life safety program. We've completed a comprehensive market research of all fire life safety software applications. Again, we've conducted the 10% audit with the assistance of third-party fire life safety consultants, and we continue to support and communicate with all divisions, agencies, and corporations with respect to fire life safety. I'll now turn over the presentation to Ryan Duggan.
Thank you, Pat. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Today, I would like to provide an overview of the fire and life safety at the City of Toronto, speak to our compliance, but before I do, I want to present you with an overview of the legal requirements of inspection, testing, and maintenance requirements for the fire and life safety systems, and speak to the unregulated marketplace in the fire and life safety service industry. The fire and life safety vendors work in an, The inspection records are required for every individual fire and life safety system we have at the City of Toronto in our buildings. Each system requires inspection, testing, and maintenance at varying frequencies as defined by the Ontario Fire Code and other standards. Now, with that, for instance, our sprinkler systems. In Metro Hall, as an example, we have 9 individual sprinkler systems. So we don't conduct 1 monthly inspection at Metro Hall. We conduct 9 monthly inspections on each individual sprinkler system, coupled with the fire alarm system, the sprinkler system, clean agent, kitchen suppression systems, as well as fire hydrants and other pieces of fire protection infrastructure. This is a major project to inspect, test, and maintain this equipment. The fire and life safety industry is very unregulated in the Canadian and Ontario marketplace. The Canadian Fire Alarm Association and Canadian Automatic Sprinkler Association do not hold any regulatory power. The CFAA, the Canadian Fire Alarm Association, offers an education program which meets the requirement of CAN-ULC, but it does not license technicians or companies. Vendors can become member companies, but membership offers no real indication of quality assurance. The province of Ontario, through the Ontario College of Trades, has developed a Red Seal trade for fire protection installers. The Ontario Fire Code is silent on qualifications for the fire protection maintenance, and with the exception of annual fire alarm inspection and maintenance, anyone can inspect, test, and maintain fire protection equipment and infrastructure in Ontario. Now that we've spoken briefly about the code requirements in the industry, I want to provide you with an overview of the audit that we've conducted. We audited 243 of our buildings, approximately 10%. We conducted a comprehensive audit involving 4 external consulting firms who conducted a paper-based and field-validated inspection and audit of the records. All divisions, agencies, and corporations, with the exception of Toronto Hydro and Toronto Community Housing, were included within the audit. These corporations have established fire and life safety groups already with a robust program. The scope of the audit reviewed the annual inspections from 2017, 2018, and we have a subset of the 2019 data as well. And additionally, we included the monthly inspections from August and September of 2018. Again, we had third-party vendors assess these records for completeness and for compliance with the Ontario Fire Code. I'll bring you through the results of the audit. I'll speak specifically to the totals that we have audited 243 of these buildings. Within those 243 buildings, as I alluded to earlier, there are a number of systems, in some cases multiple sprinkler standpipe risers that each require an individual report. So that speaks to our reports requested total. 3,312 individual reports are legally required to be available as part of the Ontario Fire Code requirements. Reports requested truly does equal reports required to be completed. As we go forward, the reports received, 1,737 reports. This is how many reports actually existed. And I'll speak to what these metrics represent in a moment. And of the 1,737 reports that were available, 1,062 were fully compliant with all of the requirements of the Ontario Fire Code. So 61% of all submitted reports were compliant. Now, overall, our entire compliance citywide through the audit that we've conducted sits at 32%. That reflects the compliance of the received records versus what should have been in place from the beginning. The 2017 and 2018 data shows significant gaps in the work completed or the report availability and the quality of the work performed by the third-party vendors. These results affirm and confirm the Auditor General's findings from July 2018. I'd like to speak specifically to what the report availability represents. The report availability metric reports on contract management, the lack of knowledge about fire and life safety systems in the buildings, and the knowledge about the inspection, testing, and maintenance requirements of those systems. There was a lack of an inventory or knowledge of what systems existed within the buildings, and with that, what the inspection, testing, and maintenance requirements were. To address this, we are currently conducting an assessment and inventory of all the fire and life safety systems in all 2,500 buildings and expect to be done before the end of 2019. The compliance numbers, again, compliance against the requirements of the Ontario Fire Code, these results speak directly to the decentralization within the City of Toronto with respect to fire and life safety. We have good staff within our buildings that know our buildings really well, but these people are not experts in fire and life safety inspection, testing, and maintenance, and unfortunately, some things have fallen through the gaps. There's historically been an underinvestment in fire and life safety at the city, and that has caught up with us as a result of this audit. Again, I spoke to the unregulated industry. We've had vendors that have been underbidding on contracts who would come in with a low bid, win the contract, and then provide poor quality service. And there was generally a lack of oversight within the City of Toronto. There wasn't a dedicated group that could, keep a tight eye with respect to fire and life safety. We've had 2 vendors that have been terminated due to poor performance throughout 2019, and there was multiple record-keeping issues as well, and we have replaced those 2 vendors with 6 higher quality vendors. I'd like to present a little bit of the 2019 data. So it's not all bad news by any stretch. So this data speaks specifically to fire alarm annual reports. So with the 6 new vendors we've brought in 2019, the bulk of the annual inspections have been scheduled for Q3 and Q4. So the data itself, our report availability, we're trending up nicely. We're north of 75%. We're sitting at 76%. We're getting a better handle on the records that are required, and those numbers are increasing. Our compliance rate, now, don't let the 40% scare you. Year over year from 2017 at 27% through 2018 at 36%. To only see a 4% increase in 2019, that's not necessarily bad news. The 2019 data includes records only from May to the beginning of August. We onboarded 2 new vendors in August as a result of one of the contracts we've terminated, and the bulk of their annual reports is scheduled again for Q3, Q4. In the early review of the data, which is still coming in from the previous month, our compliance rate is actually exceeding 70% for fire alarm annual reports. So we have good vendors doing good work now, and that is starting to be reflective in the data. We're working one-on-one with the vendors. We meet with them regularly to identify any issues or performance requirements that we're putting forward to make sure not only they meet the fire code, but meet the contract language as well. We are targeting between a 65 and 70% rate of compliance for all fire and life safety systems throughout the end of 2019. And we'll speak more to our goals going forward. Our go-forward strategy is to centralize and consolidate all fire and life safety functions and resources in a dedicated group that will own and manage all fire and life safety service contracts for annual inspections, internalize the monthly inspections for fire protection systems, provide quality assurance of internal and external service providers, develop and conduct fire safety training as required by the Ontario Fire Code, deploy Building Reports Canada software system to house and track all legislated inspection, testing, and maintenance records. And the path forward is through deploying a hybrid model. Now, the hybrid model involves conducting the inspection, testing, and maintenance for all the monthly inspections with internal staff and conducting the annual maintenance with external contracts. A group of city staff will conduct monthly inspections and testing within all city-owned and operated buildings, and vendors will conduct that annual ITM. The model provides a check and balance of internal staff conducting the inspections and vendors conducting the annual inspections. This model mirrors other major property holders, such as the Toronto Transit Commission, Cadillac Fairview, Infrastructure Ontario, and Toronto Community Housing. Internalizing the monthly service equals a lower cost and better quality control in an unregulated market. To contract out the monthly service would cost an additional $3.2 million a year versus conducting the service internally. There's a limited market capacity to provide quality monthly inspections for the city's diverse and geographically concentrated property portfolio. Deploying Building Reports Canada, a dedicated fire and life safety software system across all 2,500 properties and within those properties, we have over 10,000 individual fire and life safety systems and in excess of 30,000 fire extinguishers. They all require monthly and annual reports, and for instance, one of our sprinkler system could have over 14 individual reports on an annual basis throughout the life or throughout the entire portfolio. That's a lot of records to centralize and track and maintain. The Building Reports Canada manages fire protection infrastructure at an asset and system level and centrally houses all legislated inspection records. It's a common platform for internal staff and external vendors. It provides dashboard reporting on compliance by division. So our senior leadership, our executive director of corporate real estate, through one click can tell in real time what the state of compliance is across the City of Toronto at any individual building within a divisional portfolio or throughout the entire portfolio of 2,500 properties. Building Reports Canada is an industry leader in the fire inspection report management world. It's used by the Toronto Transit Commission, the University Health Network, the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, Bruce Power, Suncor, and over 25 leading fire protection service companies. The total funding required for the program office in 2020 is $9.8 million, which includes $3.4 million for 45 full-time equivalent positions and $6.4 million for software and contracted services. There is currently $7.1 million in funding and 6 full-time equivalent positions allocated in the city already for fire and life safety. Therefore, the incremental funding of $2.7 million and 39 FTEs is required to fund the program office in 2020. These requirements will be considered as part of the 2020 budget process. Once a program office is fully implemented in 2021, the full annual cost will stabilize around $12 million. From an implementation perspective, in November, we're going to publish the Master Fire Plan. This outlines roles and responsibilities and reporting requirements. We're going to launch the software solution of Building Reports Canada, proceed to onboard staff, and continue to support the divisions with fire and life safety issues. In 2020, we'll launch the fire training program. This will support all the training requirements from the Ontario Fire Code. We'll launch the fire safety program proper. This is the nuts and bolts of how we will inspect, test, and maintain all of our infrastructure, and begin the recurring fire code audits. Throughout 2019, we hired 4 external consultants to conduct these audits. We will have internal staff conduct these audits, as well as cover-to-cover fire code audits of our properties on a risk-based schedule. We'll begin the monthly maintenance once staffing ramps up, and centralize the contracts with a new and republish and go back to market, with for fire inspection, testing, and maintenance, with a new master specification based on today's codes that is currently being rewritten. In 2021. We'll continue to work with all our stakeholders and republish plans and programs as necessary in a series of continuous improvement initiatives. And in 2022, we will be in a steady state just to maintain the program. Thank you.
Add anything, or are we?
No, that's it. We can go to questions.
Okay, all right. Questions of staff? Councillor Filion?
Could you explain the rationale for going internal monthly but external annually? If we just logically, if we saved money going internally and we already have a complement of people who do this work, why would we not have them do the annual as well?
Through the chair, we looked at 3 different models. We looked at fully contracted services. We looked at a program approach by looking at going to market with some of the larger facility service providers to manage it, and then we looked at the hybrid. We looked at it from 2 perspectives, one from a compliancy perspective and a quality assurance perspective, as well as a cost perspective. And we looked at the 3 different models. The hybrid produced a cost savings of $3.2 million by internalizing the monthlies and annuals overall. It also assured us that we could maintain better compliance and quality assurance Because under the other two models, then we would have had to hire what I call checkers, checking the checkers, checking the checkers, meaning that we'd always have to stay on top of the vendors for compliancy. This way, we set up the quality assurance program internally for our monthly annuals and with the, for the monthlies. And for the annuals, that there's a check and balances by using two independent vendors. The other challenge being in a highly concentrated geographic area like Toronto, there are only so many tier 1 vendors that are out there that we're all competing for the same work. So we want to ensure that on the monthlies, we get good quality and ensure that, you know, the technical specifications that Ryan's working on right now to go to market actually allow us to, you know, bring in more quality vendors. It's more about quality than it is about price.
Well, what would be the financial comparison for the annual internal to external? What would we save? We saved monthly by going internal. I assume we would save annually if we went internal.
Through the chair, to conduct the annuals in-house, we did explore that, and from a cost perspective, it was about dead even, you know, within about $100,000, because the type of staff and the qualifications required to conduct the annuals is much higher than what it needs to be for a monthly. Therefore, we have increased wages and increased tools and equipment, and the reliance on allied trades as well for, you know, electrical, major pipe work, et cetera, for the sprinklers and the fire alarm systems. Additionally, the liability that comes with conducting the annuals internally versus contracting it out left the city exposed if we were to pick that work up ourselves.
Okay. Just on the $3.2 million savings, so that's the difference between the external and the internal. It's not the difference between what we were paying and what we will be paying, correct?
Through the chair, that is correct.
And I'm guessing I think you explained this to me previously, that the cost is actually going up, which is to be expected because with the contracts we had, the people weren't actually doing the work that they were supposed to be doing.
Through the chair, that is correct. So the old contracts that we terminated were undervalued, underbid in comparison to the tier 1 vendors we have now. They're actually pricing the monthlies a lot higher. So the representation of that additional $3.2 million is actually based on the tier 1 vendors we're currently using.
Okay, thank you. Question of purchasing. Just on the issue of underbidding, and I know coming out of the inquiry about, you know, some time ago, we decided to get pretty strict on going for the lowest bidder, but like in this being, I think, a prime example, when do we know that a price is, or how do we know that a price is too good to be true, that really the vendor couldn't be doing the job properly when the price is that low?
Through the chair, that, you know, from a high level perspective, it's the analysis on the particular work. So in some cases, we have an unbalanced bid analysis that we do based on the estimates that the division provides that could help identify flags that the work may be being undercut in some way. It's also the experience of the division bringing forward the rationalization of there might be issues with a particular bidder. The question has to be with respect to going with a low bid scenario versus perhaps a proposal is how we develop the specifications and requirements that go into it. So we could, in the instance of these fire life safety contracts that the auditor pointed out, there were issues just in how we developed the specifications themselves, which led to the fact that we were taken advantage of. So we need to think through all of these to kind of make sure that when we see a low bid that seems to be too good to be true, that we're applying the right analysis to say, okay, should we get rid of this particular vendor? Is this a risk that we can mitigate and manage before making a determination whether we proceed?
So as a result of the AG's report, have we altered how we go about this?
Well, through the chair, based on what Pat and Ryan were saying, like they're taking steps to review the existing contracts, they've taken steps to terminate contracts that aren't working, and they're working on developing a new procurement to go out in 2020 to address the concerns that are being raised.
And last question, I know I'm over my time, on the, where we don't have, and I'm not sure who, if you're the one to answer this, but when someone hasn't fulfilled their contract, I mean, so one action is to terminate them, but do we have provisions in our contracts that make it easy for us to also go after them for the money we've paid them to do work which they haven't performed?
Through the chair, I'll start, but I'll let anyone else want to wander in. Generally speaking, the terms need to be set up so that we can, one, to your point, terminate them if there's a default, and then be able to, we need to make sure that we have the evidence to support, being able to support going after them. So as part of this review, I'm sure that Pat and Ryan will be working with legal on ensuring that the contract terms are more reflective of this industry and what they're looking for in terms of service standards, so that they can work out, if they have to terminate a future contract, be able to go after them, if that makes sense.
But in general, not just this one contract, but in general in our contracts, do we put in language that makes it more likely that we could successfully go after someone for underperformance?
Through the chair, I would say that is more than just contract language that is required to make something successful like that. It's about also follow through on contract management and documentation by the city division running that contract. Just because a contractor may not follow the contract doesn't, and we don't do anything about it, would probably hamper our abilities to litigate.
Thank you.
Councillor Holladay?
Thank you. I wonder if we could just go over the different people involved in all of this future solution. There's a lot of players in this. So the annual inspections will be done by third-party vendors. We've got that. So people will come in and check the buildings once a year, do all the technical things, write a report, file it. The monthly inspections, which are mini inspections, are done by who in the future model? In-house, right?
Through the chair, yes. We will have a dedicated crew of technical experts.
Now, do those people, do they do technical things, or are they more paperwork based?
No, they will touch and test and,
Press
work on the
buttons,
system.
right thing, okay. And then who does the maintenance of the systems? You know, the smoke detector needs to get changed, the light bulbs out in the sign, that sort of stuff.
Depending on the scope of the work, it could be our internal monthly staff, or if it's a larger issue, then it will go to the annual vendor.
So the heavy lifting of technical work is still with the vendors?
Correct.
Right? Rewiring, replacing devices, that kind of stuff. Okay. And then in there is also a quality assurance group. So what are they doing versus the monthly inspectors, or just call them the inspectors?
Certainly. Through the chair, the quality assurance people will not only have oversight of the records, they will also field validate that what is reported on the records is true. So without revealing the techniques of how they conduct quality assurance, they will go in the field, come behind them, press the buttons on the panel, because the fire alarm systems are smart, intelligent systems that keep a log of everything that's ever been done on that system. So they will come behind them and say, it says you tested smoke detector 32. I can actually see in the history that you did test number 32.
So this is, I guess, the safety net of senior management to make sure that everything is falling into place, especially in light of the previous findings from the auditor.
Correct.
Okay. So the last check, though, I think, is the fire department. So the fire department have compliance people that come in, just like they do in every other building. And so what's the difference between what they're doing and what we're doing? Do we have duplication?
I'll speak to my side of the house first. I want to find it and fix it before our friends at Toronto Fire Service find it. I want to make sure we avoid, exposing ourselves to any litigation under the Ontario Fire Code.
Is the work similar, the same, not similar at all to Toronto Fire?
There are some similarities, but we have no legal jurisdiction or legal enforcement powers within the city, within the fire and life safety group. So, we are not sworn officers that are duty-bound to enforce the Ontario Fire Code, as our friends are at Toronto Fire.
Okay, maybe I can shift over. I see Deputy Chief Jessup there. So it sounds like the facilities folks are proposing to do in-house inspections to a high degree of standard. Do you foresee that as lessening the workload on Toronto Fire in the future? And do you have any concerns over duplication? Or is this going to make your job easier?
Well, through the chair, thanks for the question. So, as Ryan has stated, we have to maintain a very clear line in the sand, Councillor, as you know from the last report, where we cannot be inspecting buildings, performing the work that the building owner is legally responsible to do. So Toronto Fire's role in this is no different than a private building owner or a city building owner. If we find violations through our normal process, we have a duty to make sure that we take the same enforcement actions against whether it's the City of Toronto or a private building owner. So Toronto Fire has never conducted the routine tests or checks within the City of Toronto buildings. We're not permitted to do so because it would put us in conflict with our regulatory role. So in terms of lightening the workload, Councillor, we've never done that work. And in terms of what our role would be, our role will continue to be what it was, similar to what the assistance we provided the Auditor General during last year's audit, and no different than we do right now. If we find Building A or a building owned by the City of Toronto and they're non-compliance, they're going to be treated the same.
So, I mean, what I'm getting at is my sense is the people that are going to be hired by facilities are going to be highly technically proficient. They're going to be pretty good inspectors, as opposed to relying on outside vendors that, the audit results are the audit results. So my suspicion and my expectation, my hope is that our compliance is going to go way up because we've got in-house experts now. Would you say, though, that there would be an offset on the load of your department now because we should be hitting the mark, and maybe the risk is going to go down, and your compliance officers then can focus on other buildings outside of the Toronto Public Service?
So through the chair, so Councillor, certainly the numbers are the numbers that we have seen. So again, the way Toronto Fire and the chief has been very clear in terms of his expectations for compliance. But right now we look at inspections on really 3 to 4 levels. Those are the province mandates, so that workload will not change. Those that City Council has set, so for example, every high-rise residential building or every Toronto community housing building. And then what the province has deemed under a number of regulations, complaint or request. So we generally don't get a lot of complaints within the City of Toronto buildings, except for the last 18 months during this audit process. So again, I don't really see, based on the past history, any sort of offset, because we're not in there doing the inspections and tests now. That's their job. Our job is, if we receive a complaint or if we become aware of an issue, then we have to put on our other hat. So in terms of the offset, I don't really see that happening. There's still a lot of work for them to do to come into compliance over the next number of years.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Other questions of staff? No, seeing none. I just wanted to ask, we're going to spend a lot of money on this, which I think is needed. But on page 4 of the slide deck, the first point is fire and life safety vendors work in an unregulated market. How do you know what standard, how do you check the work or establish what the benchmark or the standard is that's being done properly?
Chair, we rely on the Ontario Fire Code. That sets the minimum legal requirements for inspection, testing, and maintenance in Ontario. There are gaps in the codes and standards that exist. It is not a tight, straight line, black and white requirement on how it's maintained and tested. It just requires that it be tested. Through the process of the audit and the Auditor General's report, there are no for instance, there are no standardized forms for a sprinkler inspection. So you could take a piece of loose leaf, write sprinkler inspection on it, and that is the record. The more reputable companies, of course, have their own inspection records, but we propose to mirror black and white the codes right out of the Ontario Fire Code, which then references, of course, other NFPA and CSA and CAN-ULC documents. We are going to set what our top shelf benchmarks are from a fire and life safety compliance perspective, work with the authority having jurisdiction in Toronto Fire, and up the game and become a leader within Ontario to make sure our sites are compliant.
Okay, and are we doing anything as a municipal government or Toronto Fire Service to advocate to the province to better regulate FLS and, the next point, Canadian Fire Alarm Association, Canadian Automatic Sprinkler Association, they don't have any regulatory power whatsoever. Is there any discussions with the other levels of government about doing something to have a stronger enforcement measures in place? Other than writing something on a sheet of loose leaf paper, for example?
So through the chair, the answer, Councillor, is yes. As part of a number of the recommendations the auditor directed to the fire chief after this audit, Toronto Fire has met both with the Office of the Fire Marshal and senior government officials, including both the Deputy Minister and the Minister. I am happy to say that a number of our recommendations, based on what we found and the challenges that we found from the enforcement side, dating back last year, were addressed expeditiously by the provincial government. Every request the City of Toronto made to enhance the enforcement mechanisms under the Fire Protection and Prevention Act were adopted by the government under the Budget Act. So we had both legislative and regulatory changes and amendments implemented well within 6 months after the original audit. So in answer to your question, yes, the fire chief continues to meet with senior government officials and has expressed his concern, as was brought out in the audit, as to the lack of certification and regulation regarding some of this industry. So that's a work in progress, but certainly we've been very vocal about it at the provincial level. And I think very candidly, Councillor, the very fact the government amended the Act in less than 6 months also showed that the province recognized some of the concerns that we brought to their attention.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Speakers on this item? Somebody like to move the recommendations or receive their presentation? Councillor Holiday, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, gentlemen. Our next item is number 19. City of Toronto Municipal Code, Chapter 545, Licensing Bylaw Updates. Derek Moran. There. Sorry, Derek, I didn't see behind the pillar. You have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
I just want to say, by me speaking at this meeting, this shall not be deemed to be in any way my consent expressed or implied, and doing so is fraud. God bless Her Majesty the Queen, and long live Her Majesty the Queen. And let the record show I do not consent to the unconstitutional searches violating Section 8 of the Constitution Act 1982 that are currently taking place here at Toronto City Hall, as the province has never given the City of Toronto express statutory authority to do this. So in this report it says, bylaw cleanup. Adopt the following general definition, subject to such technical and stylistic amendments as required by the City Solicitor and the Executive Director, Municipal Licensing and Standards as follows. Then further down it says, specifically, staff recommend the existing definition of food or drink be replaced with the following updated definition of food. Food or drink for human consumption and includes an ingredient of food or drink for human consumption. Also in this report it says, at its meeting of June 10th, 2015, City Council adopted amending general licensing provisions to better reflect the Ontario Human Rights Code and the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act 2005. So something, Councillor Ainsley, you don't know is I got to sit next to the commissioner for the Ontario Human Rights Commission at the last police board meeting, Renu Mandane, I think her name is. And before the meeting began, I asked her, I told her I've always wanted to ask you, why is there no definition for human? There's actually no definition for human in the Ontario Human Rights Code. And you could tell that I had stumped her. She's like, wow, is there a legal definition for human? And then the meeting began, and then people started repeatedly clapping for Andy Pringle over and over again because it was his last meeting. And what I was going to say to her next is remind her, as she is a lawyer, that there are a couple maxims of law about definitions. And one is, in law, every definition is dangerous. And then there's a second one that says every definition in the civil law is dangerous, for there is very little that cannot be overthrown. So to find a legal definition for human being, when, because the City of Toronto should come up with a definition for human for when you're cleaning up your definitions. As an example, you have to go back to 1948 with the Law Dictionary with Pronunciations by James A. Ballantyne. When you go to look up human being in this legal dictionary, you will see that it redirects you and tells you instead to go sea monster. Now, not like sea monster from a Godzilla movie, but C-S-E-E, monster. So you go up, look up monster, and monster is defined as a human being by birth, but in some part resembling a lower animal. So why is this relevant? Because has anyone here ever actually seen the definition for animal in the City of Toronto Act? Animal in the City of Toronto Act is defined as means any member of the animal kingdom other than a human. Now, if they had just stopped at means any member of the animal kingdom, that would have been fine, but the province of Ontario felt the need to put comma other than a human. So they're implying there, from what I see, is that the province of Ontario thinks that, I guess, we're animals. However, and this reminds me of something that Scott Duncan, he's like the BFF of the Law Society, once said on Facebook, it's worse than that. They, and he's talking about the Law Society in this case, they think they own you and that I'm just some animal rights activist. They really do. So when you're coming up for a definition for human and cleaning up your definition section here, something to keep in mind is, this is from Canada Attorney General versus Moet, 2009, Federal Court of Appeal said, a legal term of art is a word or expression that through usage by legal professionals has acquired a distinct legal meaning. It has a technical meaning because of its conventional use by lawyers and judges. And this is from Sullivan on the construction of statutes, and they add, that is, it has a settled legal definition. So I think we deserve to know what the settled legal definition for human is in the future. And in the Dictionary of Canadian Law, they also have a definition for just term of art, which says, some expressions in common use in documents dealing with legal rights or obligations acquire in a legal context a special meaning different from or more precise than their meaning in common speech. They become terms of art. And I just want to acknowledge Councillor Matlow quickly, Councillor Ainsley, because apparently because of him, a computer got fixed at the Northern District Library. So I want to thank Councillor Matlow. And I think there's also 3 other computers not working that maybe he could do something about.
Thank you, Derek.
He just saluted me for the record, by the way.
Thank you, Derek. Questions of the deputant? Seeing none. Thank you, Derek, and thank you for the use of the Toronto Public Library system. Our next deputant is Leticia Filipazzo.
My name is Leticia Filipazzo. I'm a lawyer with Vassos Law, LLP. Our law firm represents a number of clients operating eating establishments, hotels, entertainment establishments, among a variety of other businesses. Today I'm here to discuss a policy decision that has been made by the staff of MLS to require a criminal record and judicial matters police check requirement for all adult entertainers in order to obtain a business license which would allow them to work in the City of Toronto. We work with various entertainment establishment license holders, and we are here to voice the concerns that we have had from a number of our clients regarding application requirements for adult entertainers. MLS requires a criminal record and judicial matters police check, not only for the operator, but for every individual entertainer as part of the application process. A business license can be issued in one day. Most entertainers previously, when they arrived in Toronto, would attend at 850 Coxwell, show 2 pieces of ID, and apply for their license and obtain their license in the same day. Now, with the imposition of the requirement for a police check, an entertainer has to wait up to 15 days or longer if a criminal record or judicial matters for a judicial matters and police check. This creates an unintended and completely unnecessary burden on the mostly female applicants. An entertainer cannot work in Toronto without a business license. Unlike other municipalities, MLS has made a policy decision to require a criminal record and judicial matters police check prior to issuing a license. In order to obtain a criminal record and judicial matters police check, the individual entertainer must attend a police station at their place of residence, or in Toronto in person or online, and then still attend in person to provide their identification to obtain the police check. The majority of adult entertainers do not work in one location for more than a week or two. The nature of the business requires them to tour. We don't have the actual numbers because we're not privy to them, but there are several thousand applications for business licenses every year for entertainers just based on the number from our clients' establishments. Unlike most other business license applicants, adult entertainers travel from one province to another or from one city to another. If an entertainer is coming to Toronto to work for more than 1 or 2 weeks, then he or she arrives and is asked for a criminal record check that can take up to the 2 weeks, if not longer. Therefore, they cannot work and are forced to leave Toronto and seek employment in other jurisdictions that issue licenses on the same day without the requirement for criminal record search. As such, the process in Toronto has become onerous and has caused these applicants to relocate their tour to other municipalities in the GTA or other jurisdictions where the municipal licensing requirements are less burdensome as compared to Toronto. This causes an unintended burden on the applicant because he or she cannot work in Toronto. As well, it means that the businesses which require adult entertainers cannot find entertainers that are touring to work in their establishments. This unnecessary burden is unintentionally creating a problem for Toronto businesses. The Toronto businesses and entertainers are finding themselves in a position where business outside of Toronto have had an unfair competitive advantage because those jurisdictions do not require the criminal record check as part of their licensing requirements for adult entertainers. Research of various municipalities and their licensing requirements has shown that some other municipalities only required 2 forms of government-issued identification, and an adult entertainer may then successfully obtain an adult entertainment business license. When we have asked MLS why the city requires a criminal record check as part of their process, we are told that it is a result of the requirement contained in Bill 113. However, if one closely reviews Bill 113, which was introduced in 2015, enacted in 2018, there is no requirement contained that directs municipalities to request a criminal record or judicial matters police check. In fact, some municipalities do not require this clearance letter at all. The decision to include this requirement appears to be a purely policy-driven one, and there's no legislative requirement within the provincial document. MLS does not have to require a criminal record check as part of the licensing process for adult entertainers. As such, MLS has the discretion to not require a criminal record check at all, just like the City of Vaughan and City of Mississauga. Today, we are requesting that the committee reconsider the application for requirements for a criminal record and judicial matters police check for adult entertainers and to eliminate that requirement for entertainers. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the deputy? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming in this morning.
Thank you.
Questions of staff on this item? Speakers? Somebody move the recommendations? Councillor Filion to move the recommendations in the report. All in favor? Carried. And so we have the 2 new items that are in front of us. The first one is the City Hall Council Chambers Modernization Update. Does anybody have any questions of staff on this? Speakers? All in favor? Carried. And the last item on our agenda this morning is City of Toronto's Open Data Portal, Historical and Current Data. Anybody have any questions of staff? Questions of the mover? All in favor? Carried. And I think do we have to do a bill?
No, not this one.
Oh, okay. All right. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Matlow, all in favor? Carried. Thanks, Derek.